in Quakerism, like you can believe in God and you cannot believe in God, like, which is why I wouldn't really call them.
Oh, really?
Add more contradictions, or like did they get more contradictory as they changed, as they adapted?
Yes, but even if you look at the first page of the Bible, I always say that you don't need to go far. I mean, if you look at the verse 1, okay, you open the Bible, the first thing you find that God created what? The night and the day. Okay, so but on the fourth day He created the luminaries. So He created the sun and the moon and all these the sun, stars, all these kind of things, right? Yeah, come here to your right. So God created that. On the third day, there was vegetation that God created, the plants and whatever. Yeah? Now the thing is this, even Origen of Alexandria, who was one of the ecclesiastic church fathers, he said that how could any man of intelligence believe that there could be a day and the night without the sun and the moon, which were created afterwards? In fact, in Genesis, so this is Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, or verse 11. And then if you look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, it states that no plant has sprung up yet. So on the third day, you have plants and vegetation being created. But in Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, you had no plant has sprung up yet. Going back to the point of polygyny, which is the idea that one man can marry more than up to four women, and a woman can only marry one man. Yes, difference, and it indicates inequality. But it defies the premise that we've mentioned, which is that equality of value does not mean identicality in roles. So we say that this is something that is a responsibility that can be given to men in certain circumstances, which actually has a net effect. Pardon?
Which circumstances?
In the normal circumstance, unless otherwise stated. Like, for example, if a woman states, I don't want to be in such a relationship, and she puts that in her contract before the marriage, then that, in my view, and this is the view of the Hanbali school of thought, that has to be respected, because Muslims have to be compliant to their contracts.
Yeah.
However, if that is not put in place, then the polygynous relationship is actually something which we believe is justifiable. Why so? I mean, because of physiological and psychological and anatomical and biological difference between man and also because of an ability for men to do certain things that women cannot do. Chief most among which is protection. And although one will say, well, we don't need protection in our modern time or whatever it may be, this is, we believe, a false premise. And in fact, if I were walking with a woman in the street, whoever that woman may be, unless she was Ronda Rousey or something, and even if it was her, with all due respect, if I were walking with a woman in the street, and in an Islamic paradigm, if some threat came out from without, an extraneous threat, in the Islamic understanding, I would have to actually put my life on the line for that woman. So I'm a full-time security guard for her. Now, this is not, the same kind of responsibility is not commissioned to her, okay? And as such, because the ability for man to protect women is so much more pronounced than the opposite, and has been throughout civilization, then there is allowance there. So in sum, therefore, I say that, number one, equality of value does not mean identicality in roles. And we believe in a complementarian system, that the polygynous system is in line with the physiological and anatomical and biological differences. And moreover, I would say, and that's just on this point,
and even sociological.
Yeah.
If you look at all the civilizations that have existed, you will find that out of 130, I think.
This is a good point. Actually, what he's mentioning is a good point, because most anthropological studies show that 85 to 95, and I know it sounds like we're making this up, but you can check this up, yeah? 85 to 95, depending on what source you consult, of human society, pre-modern age, they permitted polygyny with an N, meaning one man, many women.
And you only find two societies the opposite way, where females have multiplied men.
Yeah.
Societies.
Only two. I know these societies exist, but I think it's more than two. No?
It's not. It's two. It's the one, the Mongolian, South Tibet, that, and then another one.
There's one in South America.
Oh, okay, interesting.
There are some matriarchal society, whatever you want to call them.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. So does that help on the? Yeah. Any questions on this point?
Kind
kind of. Yeah, like,
please.
Like a lot of the reasons that people have told me is like because back in the day, like when Mohammed was alive, like there was lots of wars going on, and like men would I've kind of forgotten what it is, but it's like
or men will
like
be outstrip women in terms in terms of, or the women will outstrip men in terms of population numbers and all that kind of.
So how is that gonna like be transferred to like?
Yeah, that's not the reason. That's a false reason. That's an attempt to try and make an argument about, because look, in Islam you have a ruling. It's called a hukm, okay? And then you have two things. Actually, you have two types of ruling. You have what you call ta'abbudi rulings, which are these are rulings with no reason. Like, why do we pray 4 units of prayer rather than 5? Why do we pray 5 times a day rather than 6? There is actually no reason given in the Sharia, right? We believe as Muslims that we are to submit to the rule of God, the wisdom of God, right? And there are other rulings which have a reason. Now, there's 2 types of reason here. There's what you call the causative reasoning, which is called the illah, and then you have the hikmah, or the wisdom. So what this person has tried to tell you is a potential wisdom of why polygyny is allowed. But this is, I think, a false wisdom, because polygyny would still be allowed if the population of men exceeded, the population of, exactly. If you had a society where there was more men than women, it's not as if now polygyny will be will no longer be a ruling, allowable. So this is a false, it's a misconception, or it's something which people say because they try and make Islam commensurate with an egalitarian feministic understanding of the second wave feminists. But the truth of the matter is that this is it's not actually the reason. We don't know what the reason is because it's not mentioned. It's not told us. The Quran doesn't say polygyny is allowed because of X, Y, Z. The wisdoms can be elaborated and speculated.
And argued for.
I mean, we could talk about them.
No, like literal.
And to be completely fair, I mean, like I'm telling you this myself, polygyny can sometimes be advantageous, and sometimes it can be totally disadvantageous. Sometimes it can be beneficial, and sometimes it can actually be harmful.
And it alludes in the Quran, right?
And the Quran actually allows for that possibility by saying, then if you can't be just, then marry only one.
Doesn't it say that it's not possible to be just?
Yeah, and so it gives you advice. It says, فَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ. It says, وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ النِّسَاءِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ. That you will never be able to be just with the female, with all your wives, and even if you try. So it gives you advice, practical advice. فَلَا تُمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ. So don't literally go on one direction. In other words, give one woman all the attention. فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. So you leave the other one suspended. Which means that there's going to be mistakes that are made, but so long as you try and control the variables as much as you can, then that's the practical advice.
I read a commentary on that verse, and they were saying that when it says, and you will never be just, in terms of the love and affection, that you can't control who have more affectionate relationship or intimate relationship. Are you feminist yourself?
I would say so.
Exploring.
Not really.
With those gloves, I thought. I want to give.
Yeah, I still want my friend.
You're just acquiring.
Yeah.
Islam. Okay.
So this is. I would say another thing. I would say is this, right? I want to spin this around a little bit. A lot of people say that polygyny is an institution which privileges the man, but I think
The Quran would say, what a lot of people would probably tell me is that it's actually to benefit the woman, in the way to protect the woman and like this. I don't know. For me, it depends on the situation, on where you're gonna live, or what situation you're in anyway. Like if you're in a fully Islamic society, then why would you need to be so protected, or why would you need to? If you're in an Islamic society where everyone's practicing Islam in the proper way, then a woman surely doesn't need to be protected by.
No, because here's a huge misconception, and this might sound to even Muslims, it might sound a bit odd.
Yeah.
If Islam was implemented perfectly in its entirety, and there would still be a miscarriage of justice. Okay. We believe that if Islam was, let me just mention this point again. If the rules of Islam were implemented absolutely perfectly in a utopian imagination, and the ruler was perfect, and the people were I'm not going to say the people were perfect, but the people were there, and the rules were implemented perfectly, yet there would still be a miscarriage of justice. The reason why is because the rules are not meant to produce perfect results. We believe in an eschaton, which is which means the afterlife, right? So we believe in the day of judgment. In other words, the day of judgment is a forum wherein which all the injustices will be righted, all the wrongs will be righted. So because people by their nature are imperfect, there will be people that get away with injustice in the world, even if the Islamic ruling was perfectly implemented. Let me give you an example. In Islam it says that if you, like for example, I'll give you a very controversial example, okay? Abstractly and classically, there's a death penalty for those who cheat on their spouses, man and woman. It's exact rule, right? But if a man goes into his house and he sees another man with his woman, literally having intercourse with her, yeah? He's not allowed to do anything. Now, the Quran actually tells you what you have to do.
What do you mean he's not allowed to do?
He's not.
He's not allowed to do.
Islamically, from an Islamic, he's not allowed to try and exert vigilante justice. I'm not saying he will or he wouldn't. That's a different story, But Islamically, he's not allowed to do anything. He's not allowed to get physical. He obviously can divorce her. He's finished the relationship. That's it. Yeah. Now, what happens? The Quran says you have to do something called mula'ana, which basically is that they go back and forth, and in front of a judge, and they say that basically you're lying, and then the woman has the last say. The woman, literally the woman wards off any punishment of her if she says, if she testifies 4 times or whatever. There's the process. Now, that means that this man has to live knowing that another man came into his house and had intercourse with his wife on his own bed, where he bought the bed and he bought the house, and he, all that stuff. He has to live with that now. Now, in a sense, that is a miscarriage of justice. I can give you another example which affects women as well. I'm not being, but in a sense, that's a miscarriage of justice from the Islamic perspective.
Why would that be written in the Quran if the Quran is supposed to create a kind of perfectly just society?
It's not. The Quran doesn't.
It's not written, but it's like a.
What I'm saying is, because there's an evidentiary bar, which sometimes people will get away with certain things, that even if we consider all of the things are being perfectly followed according to the Quran, it's still conceivable that there can be miscarriages of justice. And in that case, the case is literally deferred to the eschaton, to the day of judgment, which we believe every little thing that anything has ever done to anybody, any little thing that anyone has ever done to anybody, that will be weighed and it will be recompensed.
And that's also, if I may, there are certain examples in history, Western particular history, people like Robert Owens, for example, they were so utopian, industrialist, who then moves to the New World, America, and builds this utopia, and it doesn't last 5 years. So this, I think it's to do with the limitations as well of the human ability and possibility to be perfect at all time, because it's almost impossible to be perfect at all time, because we are not omnipresent, we're not omnipotent to be everywhere and pass judgment that this is always just. So it's inbuilt almost that we will fail.
Is the law perfect?
Yeah, so we would say the law is as perfect as it can be in the world, right? But it doesn't produce perfect results.
So it allows for injustice.
It's conceivable that Islamic law can be implemented fully and injustice can still happen. And if that wasn't inconceivable, then there would be no need for the day of judgment. So we believe, absolutely. Like, for example, the munafiqun, the ones who didn't believe in Islam, the hypocrites, it's unjust in a sense that they were allowed to continue existing in that society in the way that they did. But their case will be deferred on the day of judgment. But like the example I gave you is probably a better example. Now, the point I'm making is, in short, therefore, we have to look at what Islam says, what the premise of Islam is, when it relates to things like polygyny, when it relates to things like the rules, because a lot of what people do is they bring in their kind of foreign ideas, which for us are foreign, right? So Western ideas, Enlightenment ideas, and they superimpose. That becomes the barometer for what becomes mainstream acceptability or the normative or whatever it is. And if it doesn't comply with that, then it's not compliant. It's not true. But that's, for me, that doesn't have creedal disproving implications. So just because something is not compliant with second wave feminism, it doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? Just because something is not
I don't think we need to bring feminism into it. 'Cause
yeah.
No,
of course. No, I appreciate that.
Like, I don't think that's always
for example, right.
People's opinions or whatever. So.
Yeah, or liberalism. No, I'm just mentioning it because not because of you, but because it's a powerful ideology which is widespread in the West.
Yeah.
It's dominant in the West. Like liberalism is dominant. It's a dominant ethic in the West. And so just because something is not in line with liberalism, it doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah.
First, we have to prove that liberalism is true or false, or whatever ideology we're talking about is true or false in the first place. So, in terms of now going back to the basis, do you believe in God?
Yeah.
Okay. And how would you classify? How would you refer to your own kind of theological belief then? How do you believe in God? Do you believe that?
What do you identify as?
Yeah, what do you identify as? Let's put it that way.
I'm a Quaker.
Oh, a Quaker.
Interesting.
Oh, so you're Christian?
Yeah, but I would never really call myself a Christian. I'd call myself a Quaker. Like,
Okay,
that's
fine.
actually a big difference. But,
Yeah. I've never met a Quaker before. I only read about them in historical aspects.
right, yeah.
Now we've got one guy that comes here as a Quaker as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up like in like a Quaker household, like Quaker values and stuff, and then like, and in Quakerism, like you can believe in God and you cannot believe in God, like, which is why I wouldn't really call them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, but not Quaker Christians then, so.
They are a part of Christianity, like
Right.
that's how they started, but like Quakers are not really. Now they've kind of more turned into like a philosophy or like a belief system.
Okay, interesting. Now, so I want to ask you a question then. To what extent do you believe that Jesus is God?
I don't believe it.
You don't know. All right, so you believe in one God. You don't believe Jesus is God. Have you read the Prophet Muhammad's life? And
Yeah.
because you were talking about it, so what are your impressions on that?
Yeah, I think it's nice. I think it's.
Oh, did you read
sounds
Tom
like-
Holland's or
No.
Patricia Crowe?
Oh yeah. That's a good. What did you read?
I didn't really read, but I more got told by like my friends.
Oh,
like, Muslim
okay,
friends, so,
okay.
Like, I read a little bit, but the main knowledge I got was from my friends. But
All right. So the Islamic meta-narrative is as follows, right? So that we believe that there's prophets and messengers that were sent aforetime, like Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. Yeah. All of which came with the same message, which is to believe and worship in one God, and not to associate partners with Him. Now and not to associate partners with God, meaning to make something equivalent to God. So God is the all-powerful one. He's the all-knowing one. He's the creator. You know, He's omnipotent, etc. Right? And nothing is compared to Him. Nothing in creation is compared to Him. And likewise, He should not be compared with anything else. Now, all the prophets and messengers came to tell their people this, and also to tell their people to believe and worship in one God. And by that we mean submit fully to the laws of God. When we say submit fully to the laws of God, that means the revelation that is sent to the messengers and prophets. Now we believe that messengers and prophets were sent with two things. They were sent with a message, which is to worship one God, and they were also sent with some kind of an evidence. Okay, and this evidence is, it could be, in the case of Moses splitting the sea, it could be, bringing his hand out, and it becomes all white and luminous, or it could be throwing the stick and it becomes a snake, and things that you might have read in the Old Testament, which we also believe in. And it could be for the case of Jesus, that He cured the blind with God's permission, that He raised the dead with God's permission, that He walked on water, although that's not in the Quran, but it could be all those things, right? Now, having said this, we believe that the Prophet Muhammad, his evidence was the Quran itself, so that it can be analyzable for people in all times and all places. Because had it been something which was localized, then we wouldn't have had access to it in the same way as the primary audience would. And so the evidence that the Prophet Muhammad had to come with was evidence that had to be analyzable by people in all times and places. And so we believe, for example, that the Quran has no contradictions. And in fact, the Quran is the only religious book that I know of that even challenges people to find contradictions in it, which is a necessary condition for something to be the word of God. In addition to not having contradictions, we believe that the Quran is also preserved. You wanted to ask something?
yeah, so like the other texts that were changed, like the Bible, like you think like any edition of them had more contradictions, or like did they get more contradictory as they changed, as they adapted?
Yes, but even if you look at the first page of the Bible, I always say that you don't need to go far. I mean, if you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, okay, you open the Bible, the first thing you find that God created what? The night and the day. Okay, so but on the fourth day He created the luminaries. So He created the sun and the moon and all these the sun, stars, all these kind of things, right? Yeah, come here to your right. So God created that. On the third day, there was vegetation that God created, the plants and whatever, yeah? Now the thing is this. Even Origen of Alexandria, who was one of the ecclesiastic church fathers, okay, not a Muslim, yeah, he said that how could any man of intelligence believe that there could be a day and the night without the sun and the moon, which were created afterwards. In fact, in Genesis, so this is Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, or verse 11. And then if you look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, it states that no plant has sprung up yet. So on the third day, you have plants and vegetation being created. But in Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, you had no plant has sprung up yet. So you have internal contradictions, and of course, external ones as well.
Is this in the Old Testament? Or?
Yeah, Old Testament. But the same thing can be said of the New Testament. There's all kinds of contradictions. There, look at the crucifixion story. How many witnesses there were at the tomb? Was it 2? Was it 3? I mean, we can go on and on and on. But contradictions are a good way to sieve out, these supposed revelations, which claim to be from the Word of God, or the Word of God in its entirety. The idea of the biblical inerrancy, therefore, is falsified. So we say that, number one, it has to be preserved so it can be as accessible to us as it is to a primary audience. It also has to be have no contradictions, because that's a necessary condition for something to be true. But also there are other things. So for example, one of these things, and it's very interesting, because in the Old Testament, it says that one of the signs of prophethood is that the prophet would, when he speaks of an oracle or some kind of prophecy, it will come true. This is Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 21. And you'll find that when the Prophet Muhammad, he speaks about the future events, things that are going to happen in the future, that it materializes as is. In fact, the Quran, it makes a very bold claim that in 3 to 9 years, in chapter 30, verse 1 to 6, that the Romans will have been defeated, and in 3 to 9 years that they will defeat the Persians in a nearby lowland. And there's so much confidence that has come into that prediction, وَعْدَ اللَّهِ لَا يُخْلِفُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ, that this is the promise of God, and that God will not, go against His promise. We have evidences not just from the Muslim sources, but the Chronicles of Theophanes, which is a Roman source, states that exactly what the Quran predicted would happen materialized as the Quran stated, which means that when the Roman Empire was at the brink of collapse, that it was able to come back, rise up from the ashes, and defeat the Persian Empire. And so this could have gone awfully wrong. This prediction could have gone awfully wrong, and therefore we could have been able to disqualify the Quran from being the Word of God. But it didn't. And this is just one of a plethora of examples of predictions that the Quran and the Sunnah, or the Hadith of the Prophet, which materialized in the way that they did.
So do you have any question?
No.
Oh, because I obviously come from a sort of Christian background as well. I was sort of Catholic, but was educated by Jehovah's Witnesses, so it's a bit of a jumble mumble there. But to me, why Islam made so much, I said this and I came to this realization, I'm not 31 years old. The only reason why I am Muslim, not one, but one of the main reasons why I'm Muslim is because of the education that I've experienced with the Christianity. Christianity almost set me up to become a Muslim. Because of, if you sift through all the nitty-gritty and you look at sort of like the grant narrative as opposed to the meta-narrative, the grant narrative, like the main narrative of like what prophets talk about and what they experience, you will find I personally find a fine line of consistency. And it really, and the prophet basically, and this is in the Quran, the prophet steps into a tradition, a long-lasting tradition that came way before him. And I feel like for me, the biggest evidence for prophets is the will of resistance that they play in a given time. Because the majority of prophets usually face opposition. And they sort of in a meta way outlive the opposition and impact the world in a way where there's really literally levels to this, how much impactful. For example, the English language is extremely impactful, but the French language is also very impactful in the sense that a lot of the Western and the American things that we do in the culture comes from that very place. And I feel like that is a testament to that, on how much, because the Quran itself is there supposed to win the hearts of the people. So it's a very immaterial thing. And then it lives out.
But this is a good point about the Quran. Actually, this is something the Quran continuously says, that Abraham was not Yahudiyan or Nasrani. He was not a Jew or a Christian.
Yeah.
Because have you read the Quran? Have you read some of the?
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of the things you may have come across, right? Because he couldn't have been. I mean, Judah was one of his grandchildren, and obviously Christ was someone who came after him. He didn't know who he was, and there's no evidence that he knew who he was, right? In the Old Testament. So what the Quran states is that he was Hanifan Muslima. He was upright and submissive. And this is what we are calling to. We are calling to submission to God. So what do you think so far about this?
About everything.
About what I've just said. Is it conceivable to you that Islam can be true?
Yeah, of course. But I just don't have enough like evidence. That's my thing.
Okay.
Like I also had problems with Christianity because I was like, some things just didn't make sense to me, and it was like clear. Like there was some like ambiguity about it.
Yeah.
And I know that in Islam, like my friends are very like certain about what they know. Like they kind of know it very well.
Yeah.
But I don't know it very well.
Right.
Quickly.
Yeah, of course.
So, sorry. Just to add this before I forget. So you know what happened with me was that obviously I had a journey through Islam, right? And strangely enough, the more I sort of delved into Islam, the things that matter in Christianity, my appreciation for that rose, you know? But I was really able to look at it and be like, okay, this must have been from God as well, but then this is so strange. So for example, I engaged with the Gospel of John very intensively in a couple last months. And it's hard for me to believe that you actually can take that gospel and say, Jesus claimed to be God. So things like that, because I delved into Islam, it made it much more easier for me to embrace aspects of Christianity and appreciate it, I feel like, the way it should have been appreciated. Just like when the blind man says, he is a prophet. I also say that Jesus is a prophet, and nothing more. He didn't say he's God, he said he's a prophet, when he was asked by the Pharisees.
That's a good point. But going back to the point of evidence, right? So I've given you one example of a prediction. That's just one of many. I'll give you a few others just to give you kind of a taste of this, right? So the Prophet Muhammad, he made a series of predictions of the future. One of those unusual predictions that came true is that the barefooted Arabs are going to yatatawaluna fil bunyan. They're going to race to see who builds the highest constructions. Now you're seeing this materialize once again in Saudi Arabia. You're seeing it materialize in UAE. The tallest building in the world is in the UAE. Now this, in order for that to have happened, you needed to have economic conditions for that to have happened. The oil that they found in the 30s, whatever it was. Now, once again, we're seeing that happen. The Prophet even predicted things which we are seeing today in the economy. For example, he said that there will come a time where interest, like bank interest, will be so widespread that whoever does not consume it, مَنْ لَمْ يَأْكُلْهُ أَصَابَتْهُ مِنْ غُبَارٍ or أَصَابَهُ مِنْ غُبَارٍ, that whoever does not consume it himself, they will not be able to get away from its dust. In other words, it will be something that will affect everyone. The Prophet even said this. He said that sexual promiscuity will be so widespread that there will be diseases or sexually transmitted diseases that were never there in the first place. So the invention or the advent of new sexually, not just that there will be a proliferation of sexually transmitted diseases, but the advent of new sexually transmitted diseases. These are things we are seeing today. Like these are trends we are seeing today. That is aside the fact that the Prophet predicted exactly where Islam will spread. He said, Zuwiya li al-ard, that the earth has been made projected in front of me. فَرَأَيْتُ مَشَارِقَهَا وَمَغَارِبَهَا. So I saw its east parts and its west parts. وَإِنَّ أُمَّتِي سَيَبْلُغُ مُلْكَهَا, that my people will possess these areas, مَا زُوِيَ لِي مِنْهَا, what has been projected for me about it. And so he mentions the exact countries. He mentions in other places that Islam will spread to the land of Egypt, Yemen, the Levant. He even mentions the Sindh wal Hind, that there will be expeditions in India, and that there will be in Pakistan, modern day Pakistan. This is too we would say this is too detailed for someone who is an illiterate man in the desert to be able to predict. And it's so clearly the case that even people like Barnaby Rogerson, who is a historian, he said the fact that Islam spread the way it did is like the Eskimos taking over Russia and America. It's something you couldn't imagine. I was reading a book called, I think, A Brief History of the World or something, a long time ago. I'm not sure if you've read it or seen it. It's quite a popular book. It's by Gombrich, G.E. Gombrich or something like that. When I was reading the chapter on Islam, because he gives you like a history of the world, as it says on a tin. And he went to the chapter of Islam, and he was saying that the fact that Islam spread the way it did is the most astonishing thing I'm going to mention in this book, or something to that effect. And he says that if it wasn't for Charlemagne, which was one particular military leader in France at that time, we would be speaking Arabic right now. Basically, right? In England, we would be speaking Arabic right now. How it spread, which is usually used as an argument against Islam, or Islam was spread against with a sword or whatever, which is not the case, because this was a realist international relations framework. Everyone was fighting everyone. The Roman Empire was trying to expand. The Persian, but how Islam spread was, and how it did so with exactly the same way the Prophet said it would. In his most.
How did he say it would?
So he said it would go eastward and westward.
At the same time.
Yeah, زوي لي الأرض فرأيت مشارقها. I saw its east parts. He didn't say south. He didn't say شمالها وغربها وجنوبها. How do you know this?
I speak Arabic.
Oh, mashallah.
Yeah.
What the hell? What's going on here? وجنوبها.
You know it.
Yeah. All right. No, but for the people, no. Yeah. Where are you from originally?
Liverpool, England.
Well, how come you speak Arabic?
Because I got Arabic friends and I study Arabic as well.
Oh, is it? Yeah, he didn't say Janubiha or Shamaliha. So you come in and tell me, you know? I didn't expect that, I have to say. All right? He didn't say that. He says مشارقها ومغاربها وإن أمتي سيبلغ ملكها ما زوي لي منها. So he said that. And he also mentioned, like for example, right? There was a time where there was a battle called Khandaq, or the Battle of Ahzab. And this particular battle, the Muslims were in a situation of weakness. They were in a situation of weakness. And there's a hadith that states that there was a sakhra. What does that mean?
Rock?
Yeah. So now we're doing the Arabic lesson. So there was a rock, yeah, and the Prophet hit it one time, and he says, Futiha Faris, that Rome has been conquered, meaning that we're going to conquer Rome. And then he hit it again. The Persian Empire has been Faris, yeah? And then he hit it again. And then he said, Futiha Sham, yeah? So the Levant has been conquered. And then, is it Rome? Yeah, which was part of the Roman Empire at that time, right? And then he hit it again, and he said, Futiha al-Yaman, which is Yemen at that time, right? He was in a situation of weakness. Like these guys had a very small area of land that they were in control of. They were being sieged by everybody, you know. The Prophet was so hungry that he had to tie a rock to his belly to try and trick his body into thinking there was something there. And these guys were in the desperation, like the height of desperation. And this time he said Islam is going to spread to these areas, which are the most. It's like, once again, going to Barnaby Rogerson's example, it's like the Eskimos conquering Russia and America. You know, it's like that. So this in itself is an astonishing fact that historians cannot deny, and that they cannot ignore.
But didn't it spread by invasion?
Yes, it did, yes. It spread
Why
through...
Is that so astonishing?
No, because if you think about the capability of the Muslims at the time, how many were the Muslims? How many were the Persians and the Romans? It's astonishing because the Roman Empire, if you look at from its inception in 55 BC, whether you had the Gallic Wars, yeah, up until the time of the Prophet, we're talking about what? We're talking about hundreds of years of world domination. The Roman Empire was a serious empire. Then you had the Persian Empire, which once again, millennia was dominating the world. So you have these two empires which are established for centuries and millennia, that these people now, who are not even they're thousands of people, like probably maximum 10,000 in population, they're saying we're going to conquer these places. That is astonishing.
For the invasion,
yeah.
For the invasion, you are mentioning invasion. The invasion was to break the siege on the normal people. For example, Damascus or these cities, those people are not freedom to follow any religion. They have the invasion who talk about is just to break the army or the country or the government
he's saying
which rule the people.
Like the tribes.
What?
The tribes.
No, Roman.
Okay.
Roman.
Yeah, he's
So when you break
he's trying
the
to say that
state,
people
you
are not
break
being
the army,
compelled.
then you give freedom of religion for them. The invasion concept is not exactly clear as it's in the history.
Right.
It was just to break the army, then give the people the freedom to religion.
He's
It's okay to not join Islam. It's not by. Some people said that Islam spread by sword. No, you have to break the acid. Bilad Faris, this Kisra, this Iran area, this area.
That's a good point.
You need to break the army, then give the people the freedom of that. Because if we come back to different story after Islam, even there was a Safawi who ruled Iran area. That guy, the Iran area was Sunni people, and he killed around 1 million people to force them to join Shia because he want that for his rules, because he want to rule the area. And one sheikh told him, you have to go with Al-Imam al-Faqih, la. Then you need to force the people to join a Shia. They were Sunnah, then go to a Shia.
That's a good point.
So the sword sometimes not to force you to Islam, no, to remove the force on you and give you the freedom of.
And that's what the Prophet said. He said, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the people of Mecca, he said, "Da'ani bayni wa bayn sa'ir an-nas." He said, just leave me. This was the first thing he said. He said that, he said that, leave me between me and the people. So his intention was not to go and force them, because the Quran says, La ikraha fi din, there's no compulsion in religion. And that's why La ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in religion. La ikraha means no compulsion, you can't force somebody.
Enforcement.
Yeah. And that's why, in fact, when Islam did conquer these lands, and it was a conquest, when they conquered these lands, which would have otherwise conquered them, by the way, because the Roman Empire was no pacifist state, and neither was the Persian Empire. But when it did conquer those lands, as the brother mentioned, it gave freedom of religion to the people there. And someone will give some examples of where that wasn't the case in history, like the Muwahhidun or something. We'll say fine, or ISIS. We'll say whatever. These are examples which are against the Quran and Sunnah. Well, but the Quran and Sunnah are very clear that, in fact, not only do Christians and Jews should they be allowed to choose their own religion, but they should have their own legal systems as well, which are efficacious. So in other words, if there's a ruling that they come up with, that ruling is actually upheld, which is actually not even afforded to us as Muslims in this country, funny enough. Like, for example, if I wanted to rule on Islamic law or something, I go to a so-called Sharia council. This is just a person giving an opinion at the end of the day. That's all it is. There's no power of enforcement. He can't call the police and, okay, a woman has called a khula or whatever, and then now the police are going to get involved. No, that's nothing like that, right? So there's no power, but in the Islamic state, there was actually power of enforcement. So when the Christians and Jews had ruled on their own terms, they could enforce their laws. And so this is a very interesting pluralistic element of the Islamic system. People they think it's some kind of totalizing force, but it's not. It's correct. It's not. When we say conquest, we're not talking about forcing people. And you know what's funny? Because
something for Mecca,
one more thing. This is not even something we're saying. I mean, there's an Orientalist called Thomas Arnold Walker, who wrote a book called The Preaching of Islam. And in it, he says this. He says, when Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he conquered Jerusalem, which, by the way, is another prophecy, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "A'dud sittan bayna yaday as-sa'a, mawti thumma fathu bayt al-Maqdis." He said that count 6 things before the hour, my death and then the conquest of Jerusalem, which is exactly what happened, right?
Isn't that also written that something like that will happen again in the future?
No, this is Constantinople, right? So there's another one, Fath al-Constantiniyya, which is present-day Istanbul. Scholars of Islam have differed. Has this happened? Or
Al-Quds?
No.
Yeah, like,
It will be twice, yes.
exactly.
Oh, right.
It will be under siege twice. The first one was Umar's time.
No, but
The second
what we're
one will
talking
be
about.
at the end of the war.
No. But what we're talking about, the Quran indicates that. But in terms of that prophecy, it was fulfilled. The prophecy has already been fulfilled. When the Prophet ﷺ, he said that Constantinople will be conquered. Some scholars say actually what happened with Muhammad Fatah the Ottoman leader, it's not actually the conquest, because there was fighting, and it says in the hadith there will not be fighting. So some scholars say that this will be done again. But I don't know if that's the case or not. We have to look into it. The issue of Jerusalem, as you've mentioned, the Quran says, فَإِذَا جَاءَ أَمْرُ الْآخِرَةِ لِيَسُوءُوا وُجُوهَهُمْ وليدخل المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة
Re-enter again.
Yeah, so this is in chapter 17 of the Quran, I think verse 7, right? So that they will come in again after. Yeah, after the masjid here is the Masjid al-Aqsa.
This voice now for Mecca, what you said. the Prophet Muhammad was fired from Mecca and he ran away because they want to kill him. And then he fight with Mecca people. Okay, they was his enemy. And they are his neighbors, his family, his big family. When he back to Mecca and occupied Mecca, let's say like this, he entered with army. Then when he gathered them, his yesterday enemies,
He forgave them.
yes,
That's a good point.
He yesterday enemies, he asked them, what you want me to do with you? Now they are my enemies and you kill many of my beloved ones. Now what you will do with me? What shall I do with you? They said, you are a brother and son of a brother. Then he said,
Let's yeah.
You go, you are free to do whatever you want. He didn't even not kill them and take revenge, and none even ask them to go to Islam. You go wherever you want.
Even the killer
and
of his
some of them join Islam because of this freedom, and that's our enemy yesterday. Today he is forgive us, and even didn't take our homes, our money, whatever. And some of them join Islam, and after a few days from taking Mecca, Prophet Muhammad with his army go to At-Taif. And some of them join the army and go with him.
MashaAllah, you're good knowledge of the series, guys, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is good. What's your name, Akhi?
Muhammad.
Very good, MashaAllah. I like.
Visitor
No, he's
UK.
no, but you got good knowledge of the seerah, MashaAllah. In fact, that's true. And this speaks to the Prophet ﷺ, his compassion, because one of the amazing things that, for me, when I read it the first time, I couldn't believe it. Actually, there was a man called Wahshi, and he killed the Prophet ﷺ's uncle. His name is Hamza. He was his uncle, and he loved. Like if you look at the seerah or the Prophet's life, you see how much he loved his uncle, right? He was always there for him as a strong pillar of his life. And he got killed in he brutally killed by this guy called Wahshi. But when he went into Mecca, Wahshi, he forgave him as well. This man called Wahshi. And then the only thing he told him is, ممكن تغيب وجهك عني? Can you just not show me your face? Because I keep getting these kind of traumatic thoughts. And in fact, it was a mercy for him to say that, because he didn't want to have bad thoughts about Wahshi. But he forgave him. He said, I'll forgive you. The point is that when you look at the Prophet's life, not only did he exhibit the impeccable virtue, okay, really, when you look at it, forgiveness, bravery, all these kind of things, but you see that also he showed the right kinds of evidences. The things why do we really believe in him? Why are we standing here today? Why? Because when we look at his life and we look at the evidences that he provided, the Quran, and we read it, I'm convinced that this cannot be from a human construction. It cannot be. It cannot be. Because there's too much look, the Quran makes too many claims. It makes claims about nature. It makes claims about history. You know, the Quran makes claims about history. And the Quran states, تِلْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهَا إِلَيْكَ ما كنت تعلمها أنت ولا قومك من قبل هذا فاصبر إن العاقبة للمتقين. That these are from the stories these are from the unseen, the paradigm of the unseen. We tell it to you. You didn't know it, and neither did your people. So have patience, because the end result will be for those who are pious. Now, when you look at the stories of the Quran, that by itself, where did the stories come from? Now you can say, well, it was taken from the Old Testament, it was taken from Talmudic sources or whatever, right? But why is it the case then that the Islamic narrative actually corrects those things on things which we've only discovered recently? I'll give you an example. One very simple and uncontroversial example. That in the Quran it says, when it's Joseph, who the great-grandchild of Abraham, when he discusses it when he talks with the supreme leader of Egypt, he calls him Malik. But in Genesis, Joseph calls him Pharaoh. But after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, only recently, 300-400 years ago, we have been able to realize that actually there was the Hiscox dynasty at that time, and it's a particular dynasty in the time of Joseph. It was impossible that would have been in the New Kingdom. Therefore, there was kings and not pharaohs. So the Quran states something, the Bible states something else. The Quran is correcting the Bible. In fact, there's some things in the Quran that are mentioned that are so easy, a prima facie reading, that the Bible has no mention of. Pharaoh says, "Anna rabbukumul a'la." Pharaoh of Moses. He says, "Anna rabbukumul a'la." I am your Lord. The Bible never states that that Pharaoh said that. But we know now, you don't need to be an Egyptologist to know that this is what they were saying. And in fact, not only that, it's indicated in the Quranic narrative that you have other gods that were worshipped aside Pharaoh. وقال موسى وقالوا أتذر موسى وقومه ليفسدوا في الأرض ويذرك وآلهتك, that you leave you and your gods, meaning you have other gods that you worship. We know they believed in Ra and Isis and Horus and all these other gods. That's not mentioned in the Old Testament. Very straightforward, basic thing. You don't need to be, once again, I don't need to get you sources. We know that that is the case. So these are just examples of where things are mentioned in history, تلك من أنباء الغيب, that these are things that are historical things. ما كنت تعلمها أنت ولا قومك. You didn't know it and your people didn't. How did you know? How did it come? Where did it come from? Where did this illiterate man in the desert, get information about previous nations where the hieroglyphic was a dead language and that we needed the Rosetta Stone to uncode it? You see the point?
Yeah, true. But don't you think it has something to do with the fact that they were written 600 years apart? Don't you think the time could explain why more things were known in the Quran than the Bible?
No, because as I say, the hieroglyphic language, right, which is where, for example, talk about Egyptology, right? Yeah. That was inaccessible to those people. It was inaccessible. The Arabs. You'd have to go to Egypt. You'd have to now excavate things. By the way, there are things that need to be excavated. Like, for example, I'll give you one example, right? Now,
I have good examples.
I'll tell you, I know what you're thinking.
Okay, yeah.
I know what you're thinking, brother.
Tell me.
Where Ramses II is usually, he is seen as the pharaoh of the Bible, right? And for good reason. You know why? Because Merenptah, who was his successor, there's something in Egyptology called a stela. Now, a stela is a rock. In that rock, they write history. It's extra biblical information. In the 11th line of the Merenptah stele, it's mentioned the children of Israel. So who came and we expelled the children of Israel? This is not in the Quran, not in the Bible. This is a rock, which is now consensus among Egyptologists that this is a true rock. Before Merenptah was Ramses II, who, I don't know, he reigned for 91 years. Now, that's why it's seen as he is the pharaoh, and also because he was in the New Kingdom and all that kind of stuff. Now, the Quran states, فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً. We will now preserve your body so that you can be, for those who come after you, a sign, like you. You wanted evidence, you say, okay, fine, this is a sign. Now, فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ, with your body, we will preserve your body, لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً. When did they discover the body of Ramses II? So recently, I think in the last, 100 years, yeah? In fact, it was such a thing. I'm from Egypt, actually. Originally, I'm from Egyptian, yeah? And I don't know if you know this, but at that time, it was a Sadat. I think must have been in the 70s, right? And he because he respects, he was a nationalist or whatever, he gave this Ramses II, he sent him to France, museum in France, and he gave him a ceremonial leaving. Like the cars were there and all this kind of, because he wanted to give respect to this Ramses II, even though he's the pharaoh of the Quran, right? The antagonist, the major antagonist of the Quran. Give him a ceremonial leave. Anyway, the point is that this is something that is okay. It's not a matter of could have been known within the 600 years, because it's something that happened after the 600 years.
Yeah, true.
Do you see the point?
Okay. Now my story is different. Another one.
Oh, you got another one.
It's the cave story.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
The spider. No.
Huh? It's the cave. Yes, it's the cave people. By the way, this story was just known by the religious Jewish in the Prophet times. And it's old, ancient story, not in the time of Prophet or 100, 200 years. It's very old. And only the Jewish high-level religious know these stories. So some of the people, which is not non-Muslim, told the Jewish, as you know the history and you have your book and you know a lot of stories, give us one specific and have evidence story. We can ask Prophet Mohammed if he know it or not. But we want story. Nobody in the world know it. They told them, the Jewish, let's ask them about the cave people. Ask them two questions. How much the number of them and how many years they are asleep. You know the cave story? They sleep for 300 something years. This is one of the evidences from Allah, but this long time ago. So they go to Prophet Muhammad and they ask him, there is cave story, there is a good people there, sleep for a few years. How much these years? How much their numbers? Now, Prophet Muhammad don't know. Told them, okay, I will let you know. I will let you know tomorrow. And this, by the way, was something Allah learned Prophet Muhammad. That's, you cannot guarantee tomorrow I'll give you this information. So Allah didn't send him the reply after one day, after many days. Now, back to the Jewish, they told them the answers are 309 years. The second answer that the Jewish themselves, they don't know the number of the cave people. They have 3 stories on them. يقولون 43 كلب. 3 and half, the fourth one is the dog. ويقولون 5 سادسهم كلبهم. And the second story that they are 5 and their 6 is the dog. And the main one, or the most probably one, is 7 and the 8 is their dog. So even the Jewish, 7 people and the dog is the 8. Because the story was about the people with dog. So they have 3 stories. The most probably one is 7 and the 8 is dog. So they back to Prophet Muhammad, and then after some time, Jibreel give him the information. So the information, now if Prophet Muhammad said 4 and the dog 5, it's false. If he said second one, it's false. If he mentioned third one, it's probably the right one, but if he know how they knows, he must mention the 3 one. And then the answer come in Quran. It's still now we can read it every one Friday. It was mentioned, يقولون, they said, يعني the stories as I said, 3 رابعهم كلبهم أو 5 سادسهم كلبهم رجما بالغيب, like like a stop point to show that the third one is the most probably one. Then they mention لبثوا في كهفهم 300 سنين وازدادوا 9, which means 309. Then when those people take the answer to Jewish, they told him this is a prophet. This answer nobody know it at all. And another miracle happened that.
بس خليها let her react to it, because it's
309, just this one. This
okay, go ahead.
Another miracle.
Yeah.
That's ويقولون لبثوا فيها 300 سنين وازدادوا 9. They mention in their books 300 sun years, but the Quran reply 309. If you take it 300, it's the sun years. If you take it 309, it's the moon years. Sorry, bro. Okay.
Khalas. So you were talking about some evidences. So we've provided you with some of them.
Yeah.
Do you think that they're sufficient?
No.
Not yet?
No, they're like good evidence, but
Okay.
You
need more time?
Yeah, I need more time, or I need to see things, like not just hear things.
Like what?
Well, no, I don't mean to see a miracle, but like I need to like see how like people can live a great life, a great Islamic life. Like I'm sure it exists, but like.
But the thing is, let me tell you something, right? I think that standard is not a great standard. Let me tell you why. Even if the people don't live a great Islamic life, what it should be the pursuit of truth. Now, the truth of the matter is, when you actually do live with truth and you live your purpose, that is more likely, and I think now cognitive psychology has kind of shown this, right? When you live your purpose and you have real meaning, that is more likely to keep away depression from your life, anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. That's why the Prophet ﷺ stated, and you come here because there's cameras and stuff. Okay, sorry. The Prophet stated, right? He stated that عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ, and that wondrous is the affair of the believer. إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ, that all of his affair is good. وَلَيْسَ ذَاكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ, and this is not the case for anyone except for the believer. إِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ سَرَّاء شَكَرْ, if good things happen to him, he's thankful. وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ ضَرَّاء صَبَرَ وَشَكَرَ, if bad things happen to him, he's thankful and he's patient. Islam doesn't give you, I can't sell a lie to you or whatever. Islam doesn't say that when you become Muslim everything's going to be okay. In fact, the Quran says the opposite. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ فَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. It says that we will actually test you. When they first became Muslim, it said we will test you with something of hunger, fear and hunger, and depreciation of assets, and so on. Yeah, and so give glad tidings to those who are patient. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. If bad things happen to them, say we belong to God and we will return to Him. So it's what it is that when you embrace Islam, you have a mentality now. You have a new psychological mentality, which is that there's a greater purpose for everything. Pain becomes meaningful. Right now, as it stands, if you don't have a greater purpose for something, you can easily plunge into an existential type of nihilism. Everything meaningless, pain is irrelevant, whatever. I don't even know how to make sense of it. From the Islamic paradigm, it's not that pain will dissipate. but it's the fact that pain will become meaningful. Pain becomes meaningful, and that makes you more patient. And so in many ways, that's what we can provide, or what Allah provides, what Islam provides. It's not
How
that...
is that different from other religions? Like other religions makes your pain meaningful as well.
Right, the major difference...
I'm being manhandled. No one's got a right to touch me.
Yeah, don't touch him, please, yeah? Bro, please stop touching him. Yeah. It's different from other religions in so much as Islam will give you the ability not to have cognitive dissonance. In psychology, the idea of cognitive dissonance is when you have one set of beliefs and your rationalizations are different. If you're a Christian, your rationality will eventually catch up to your beliefs, because you're going to say the Father is Almighty, the Son is Almighty, and the Holy Spirit is Almighty, but there are not three Almighties but one, which is exactly what their creed say. But then you're going to say to yourself, I don't agree with this. In your mind, you will struggle with this as a matter of fact. Not only that, but you will not be able to reconcile it. Now, Islam, so in order for this to be really meaningful, you need to have a metaphysical worldview which is self-consistent. Is self-consistent, and which actually doesn't create more problems in the case of, for example, cognitive dissonance. That's what we say. Islam, because it's self-consistent, and the premise of it is extremely basic, which is to submit your will and to worship one God. That's what we're saying. The higher power, the creator of the universe, the all-knowing one, the all-wise one, we just follow the wisdom of God. And if we do so perfectly, then pain becomes meaningful, then the afterlife, then on the sick bed, when we're about to die and we're about, we have something to look forward to. That becomes a meaningful expression. If something happens, someone gets cancer, which all these things you can't control. All of this stuff is tests. It's a test, because Allah says in the Quran, we have created life and death as a test. لِنَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. So we could teach you or could test you who of you are the best in deeds. وَبَلَوْنَاهُمْ بِالْحَسَنَاتِ وَالسَّيِّئَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجَعُونَ. We have tested them with good things and bad things so they can come back to us. So with tests, there's always a reason. Now, when you don't have a reason, it's not just that you'll get depression, which is 100% you will get it. You'll be depressed, you'll be anxious, you won't know what's happening, but it's that depression will be meaningless. And so what we're saying is that this is the Islamic good life. Not that, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, of course, I don't mean that. I mean a life that I can see people's ambitions and meanings, and like of course every life's not going to be
of course
straight like that. I don't mean like
But
that.
can you see where I'm coming from with this? Yeah. So having said that, is there any other things that you want?
Not right now. I haven't got. I have got more questions, but I can't really think about them now.
Yeah.
But I'll come back and answer.
All right. So, are you comfortable? What is stopping you from becoming Muslim right now?
I don't think I've got sufficient information,
Fine.
to be honest.
All right. Let's do it this then. How about this? Yeah. So, go home today, start reading the Quran, and start reading a brief explanation of the Prophet's life. And you can even read like Karen Armstrong's book. She's got a good kind of book on the Prophet Muhammad. I'm not sure if you've seen her. Her name is Karen Armstrong. She has something about the Prophet's, or if not, the sealed nectar, which I think is my recommendation to you. Yeah, just read something about the Prophet's life, read the Quran, and ask yourself one question: is this the truth? And if it is, then not embracing it also has its consequences, eschatological consequences in the afterlife, because you've been presented with it. We believe that those who disbelieve after they've been, has its consequences.
Yeah, true. But how does someone know that they have got enough? How do they know that they've been presented with enough information?
Yeah, but you have been. Let me tell you why.
Why?
Because we believe that every human being has been born with a fitra, or the innate disposition to believe in God, right? And so if I tell you, look, the purpose of life is to worship God, and this is the meta-narrative of all the prophets, right? Then really instinctively, you should have an inclination to that. It's not really even, it's ultra rational. It should be, okay, I believe in the Creator and I have a connection to that Creator. So long as what I'm saying does not contradict your instinct, it should be something which is second nature, something you accept. But so in a sense, that's why the Quran says, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We're not going to punish anyone except when we send them a messenger. But you do have a responsibility now, I have to be honest with you, because you have been sent or you have been given enough, I believe, of the message to be able to make an informed
What
decision.
if I don't believe anything you've just told me? I'm not saying I don't.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, in that case, it depends now. If you go home and say, forget this, we believe, and I have to be completely honest with you, right? There's a threat of eternal damnation, fire. That's the truth. And if you agree with it, we believe there's eternal salvation in heaven. We are like Christians, believe heaven and hell, right? And I'm not saying that, this is what we believe.
Yeah.
So look, Sophie, look into it in your own time, yeah? The Quran and the Seerah, which is the biography, it's called the Seerah, the biography of the Prophet, yeah? And make your own decision in your own time. And we're here, if I'm not here, then someone else will be here, And if you need anything, you can message me or you can email me as well, yeah?
All right.
Have you got any other questions?
No.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, yeah?
You too.
If you need anything else, let us know.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you very much, yeah? See you later. Guys, take my mics away.